Army Sergeant Bo Bergdahl was spared a prison sentence today for deserting in Afghanistan. A military judge at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, gave him a dishonorable discharge, lowered his rank to private, and ordered him to forfeit pay. The 31-year-old had pleaded guilty to desertion and misbehavior before the enemy. He left his post in 2009 and was held by the Taliban for 5 years before the Obama administration engineered a prisoner swap in 2014. President Trump had denounced Bergdahl as a traitor, and he tweeted today, "The decision is a complete and total disgrace to our country and to our military." Hari Srinivasan spoke a short time ago with Bergdahl's attorney, Eugene Fidel, who described surprise at the sentence.
We didn't know what to expect because military justice sentencing is so open-ended, so virtually anything would have surprised us.
I mean, your client was facing life behind bars. What do you think made the difference?
Well, on one level, I think the judge was quite alert to the very powerful evidence of contrition on the part of Sergeant Bergdahl, as well as the undisputed evidence about the horrible conditions that he survived when he was in the hands of the Haqqani network, his numerous efforts at escape, which is what is expected of GIs who fall into enemy hands, and really the grit and courage that he showed once he was a captive.
What was his reaction to the process?
His reaction to winding things up was, I believe, one of great relief. The uncertainty of the entire process, which has gone on for over 3 years since he was recovered from the Haqqani, but also, in particular, the last day or so during deliberations when he and everybody else was on pins and needles as to what Judge Nance would do.
Do you think that then candidate Trump on the campaign trail calling Bo Bergdahl a dirty, rotten traitor played into this decision?
The judge indicated that he would take into account President Trump's endless flow of nasty comments, disparaging comments about Sergeant Bergdahl when the time came to pronounce a sentence. Now, I have to add, the news did not stop with the sentencing because President Trump, once the sentence became public, was at it again and once again described Sergeant Bergdahl in terrible terms, referring to this as an outrageous sentence and basically undermining the entire rule of law in the U.S. Armed Forces. President Trump has apparently learned absolutely nothing from this litigation.
So the fact that the president called this today a complete disgrace to our country and to our military, does that factor into your strategy going forward?
It gives us additional arguments, although in my personal opinion, we have a winning unlawful command influence argument even without President Trump's latest vituperative comments.
Are you pursuing the Prisoner of War medal, and if so, why?
Well, I think that Sergeant Bergdahl is entitled to a Prisoner of War medal. He, for all intents and purposes, was a prisoner of war. He was held, in fact, in conditions that are as bad as the conditions any prisoner of war has been held in since the Vietnam era. And we're definitely going to keep looking at the his entitlement to a POW medal. I think at present, the time that Sergeant Bergdahl was held by the Haqqanis is not part of any period of desertion. The judge made a ruling on that. The period of desertion was, in fact, only 1 day long, according to the court's findings. And personally, I think that he's entitled to the medal.
But will you be challenging the dishonorable discharge? Is that just a matter of course that happens when these verdicts come down?
Because there's a punitive discharge, in other words, in this case, a dishonorable discharge, Sergeant Bergdahl is entitled to appellate review by the U.S. Army Court of Criminal Appeals, thereafter by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces, and potentially the Supreme Court of the United States. A dishonorable discharge involves a lifetime stigma and loss of valuable benefits, and we believe that there are meritorious issues that have to be raised on appeal, and we're going to raise them.
Finally, you mentioned Bo Bergdahl's contrition. Given over the past few weeks that he has heard the testimony of those people who were injured in trying to rescue him, what does he say to you? How does he plan to try to repay them?
Well, it's not a question of repaying, and I obviously cannot compromise the confidentiality of my communications with Sergeant Bergdahl. But what I can tell you is what he said in the courtroom. He said that he was extremely upset about the fact that people were injured searching for him. I think his contrition is very, very clear. He I think, has felt that extremely deeply, and the fact that he pleaded guilty without the protection afforded by a pretrial agreement speaks volumes about his willingness to accept responsibility. You know, you don't plead guilty unless you feel guilty and you feel that you meet the standards that have been set by the judge under the applicable rules in the Uniform Code of Military Justice.
All right, Eugene Fidel, thanks so much.
My pleasure.